um, a basic right that every human should have, and so we want to encourage these people to explore that, to check the GI Rights hotline, the Military Law Task Force. These people have resources. And another thing that I believed when I was in the military, that if I did resist, that I would go to jail, I would go to prison, I would never be able to get a job, my life would be over. Over these years doing this work, I've met so many resistors who walked away from the military and said, no, I won't participate, and they have wonderful, happy, productive lives. And there's a lot of people in this world who really support and respect folks who refuse to kill. And so, if we can get that message and tell people that they have a choice, then hopefully that'll put more pressure on the military and stop these drones from flying. Another thing that I think is really frightening is that, as apathetic as the public is, one thing that they're tracking is these numbers of U.S. service members dead. And it seems like people have accepted drones as this positive alternative to boots on the ground, and now we really don't have to think about it. We really don't have to worry about it because none of our people are in danger. And I just think it's really sick and disturbing, and I think that the signs here that say Black Lives Matter, Muslims Lives Matter, I think it's so basic and fundamental, but we have to remind people of that, and that these are people, these are humans, these are families in these countries, and their lives deserve respect as well.
Yeah. Can I just make a quick retort to what you said, Maggie, is that you're right. Desmond Tutu, in the foreword to Marjorie Cohen's new book on drones, said in an editorial that he wrote for the New York Times, is that the way the policy of the U.S. government is, it appears that the United States, what the president had said, is that the lives of the children in the United States are of more value than the lives of the children in the rest of the world. He says, is the United States really saying that? Is that what the rest of the world is to believe? And I think Maggie's point goes right to that. And to the one final thing on the conscientious objector thing, John F. Kennedy quoted as saying that the wars will not end until the conscientious objector is elevated to the same status, high status, as the warrior. And once that happens, then we can end wars. But I thought that was a remarkable statement coming from President Kennedy.
I think it's more or less generally accepted amongst the American public that American lives do matter more. And if that wasn't our socialization and part of our grooming as we're growing up and just learning that we're the best, greatest country in the world, then we couldn't be doing what we're doing. But when you boil that down, all too many people are all too well aware that some American lives matter and others don't, or others matter considerably less. And this is important that we're here, and it's important that if one kid in Yemen, or Pakistan, or Somalia, or Uganda, or wherever we are, sees that protesters are out here, and he's like, well, at least someone cares, and if that gives them the strength to rise and just wake up one more day and continue to live, then to me that's worth it. But there's until we can humanize the kids that live 2-3 blocks away, like when we find out that a young black teenager is shot or stabbed, or a young Puerto Rican kid is gunned down in the streets, and we're programmed in many communities to assume it's gang related, or there's some reason he must have been doing something wrong. And until we can humanize kids in our own neighborhoods that are on our kids' Pop Warner football team, then folks in Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan and Yemen and Somalia and Palestine and the West Bank and Gaza have a big uphill battle. And if whatever little bit we can do to fight for that, and it's all connected. And the first time I heard Dr. King's speech that he gave at Riverside Church in Harlem 1 year to the day that he was killed, beyond Vietnam, I was blown away, because growing up we always had Martin Luther King Jr. Day off from school, and we were taught that he was this great human being, and I think we had to memorize the I Have a Dream speech, and that's great. But that is doing such a disservice to Dr. King's legacy, because that speech, if you edit and crop in the current countries and the current groups of people we're killing and the current communities in this country suffering, and they're expanding by the day, they should be teaching that in schools, and there's a reason they're not, because then kids aren't going to be signing up to go and kill these people that have, because they'll realize that, oh, well, these are, as Gandhi said, unless you can see God in the next person you meet, you don't need to look any further. And if I can recommend, if there's any young kids that see this, War is a Racket by the most decorated Marine ever, Smedley Butler, who two Congressional Medals of Honor. I hadn't heard of him, and even my friends that were in the Marines didn't know the work that he did after the war, speaking out and basically calling it for what it was. And there's a book called War is a Racket, and he was the only high-ranking officer that, after he retired, that stood with the veterans along the Anacostia River in the Bonus Army, in the Bonus March in summer 33, as they fought for what was promised them, this bonus, this little pittance, few cents a day for each day they spent over in World War I. And it was denied to them, and they were shot at and killed, and their shacks were burned down in Washington, D.C. by active duty military. And I didn't hear about that until I was out of the military. And the list goes on and on and on. And I guess my motto that I live my life by, and then I'll shut up, is I'm for truth no matter who tells it, and I'm for justice no matter who it's for or against. I'm a human being, and as such, I'm for whatever benefits humanity as a whole. And that's Malcolm X. And growing up, I'm like, oh, he's this crazy radical guy. And I took a class called Malcolm and Martin, and the majority of the class was young 18, 19-year-old African-American kids. And most of them, when the professor had everybody raise their hand, and what did you learn about Martin growing up? And I have a dream and blah, blah, blah. What'd you learn about Malcolm? Oh, well, that was, so even to young black kids, that was off limits. He was a little bit too radical, and he was not. He did not advocate violence. He advocated self-defense, and there's a big difference. And those, we're all human beings, and without dehumanizing all these groups, we couldn't. These folks would be out of a job, and all right.
We just bounce off each other. The only other thing that I would want to know would be, to talk about the indictment letter